Tensions between the United States and European Union are escalating as the EU condemns Trump's sanctions on the International Criminal Court, ICC. The move, seen as an attack on global justice, has drawn sharp criticism, with European leaders warning that it could undermine accountability for war crimes. Meanwhile, in Washington, Russell Vought has been confirmed as Trump's budget chief, paving the way for massive spending cuts, an overhaul of the federal workforce, and the consolidation of executive power. His policies could reshape the U.S. economy and government structure for years to come. As we break down these major developments, we will also discuss Trump's latest statements on Iran, where he has emphasized economic pressure while signaling an openness to negotiations on a nuclear deal. Let's get in focus. The European Union has strongly condemned Trump's sanctions against the ICC, calling them a direct attack on international law. The U.S. imposed asset freezes, travel bans, and visa restrictions on ICC officials investigating war crimes in Gaza. While the U.S. and Israel reject the court's jurisdiction, the EU views this move as an attempt to shield Israeli leaders from accountability. With the ICC standing firm despite U.S. pressure, could this trigger a broader transatlantic diplomatic crisis? As the Washington Post highlights, Trump's aggressive measures against the ICC have drawn swift condemnation from the European leaders, who view them as an unprecedented attack on international justice. The Netherlands, Germany, and EU officials have reaffirmed their commitment to defending the ICC, warning that these sanctions could set a dangerous precedent for global accountability. With the ICC calling on its 125 member states to resist U.S. pressure, how will this confrontation unfold? Joining us now is Mr. Justin Thomas Russell, the Executive Director of the Global Foreign Policy Center of Washington. Welcome, sir. Now, let me start by asking you, Trump's sanctions against the ICC have triggered a major backlash. Why has the EU taken such a strong stance against these measures?
Well, thanks for having me, as always. The short answer here is the fact that, the ICC is largely looked at as the international court when dealing with international crises and justice. It is very obvious that when the ICC issued the arrest warrants for humanitarian crimes and crimes against humanity against several folks inside the Israeli government, including Benjamin Netanyahu. Everybody knows the close relationship between Tel Aviv and Washington, the relationship between Benjamin Netanyahu and Donald Trump. They have very similar styles of governing. And as a result, I think it was to protect our ally as well as to send a statement that, Donald Trump and the United States government under his administration feels like there really isn't a need. We'll be the ones to determine justice and what's best for the U.S. Is it a smart move? No, it's not. And as we've seen, this is going to cause a lot of tension between our Western allies and Washington.
Mm-hmm. So the ICC is investigating Israeli leaders, but also Hamas officials. Yet Trump's sanctions seem to be targeting only the court's probe into Israel. What message does this send about the U.S. foreign policy?
Well, as you pointed out, there's investigations regarding Hamas leadership, and there's arrest warrants for several members of Hamas leadership that as a result of the October 7th tragedy. and the horrific events there. At the same time that they've also indicted and put out arrest warrants for several senior leaders in Tel Aviv in the Israeli government. The message it sends is that, while the U.S. poses itself internationally as an equal and fair administrator of justice, that you've heard Donald Trump talk about a country of justice and a country of laws. It seems very, very visible today that the Trump administration, particularly when it comes to international courts and the recognition of their jurisdiction and their sovereignty as a judicial branch, there's no question that the Trump administration feels that they don't have the best interest of the United States legally in an international forum, and the U.S. will play by its own rules.
Mm-hmm. The U.S. will play by its own rules. Okay. The Netherlands and Germany have pledged to shield ICC officials from these sanctions. Could this lead to a legal dispute between the U.S. and EU nations?
I think it's unclear. This is untested waters. This is someplace that the United States and the federal government here in Washington have never really seen before. So this is going to be a new test for the ICC and the relationship between Washington and our allies abroad. Mm-hmm. The critical thing here that we have to look at is that if our allies, for example, if Germany starts dealing with sanctioned individuals from the ICC, that could put Germany in legal jeopardy of its dealings here in the United States. Same thing with the Netherlands. And we've also seen indications that the United Kingdom, France, and Italy will also not adhere to the sanctions requirements put forth by the United States. And that could put their relationships and their individuals that do have contact and direct relationships with members of the ICC, that could put their relationships here in jeopardy. This could be not only a very big legal challenge, but this could be a very huge diplomatic challenge at the same time.
So the ICC has vowed to continue its work despite U.S. pressure. Do you see this escalating into a full-scale diplomatic crisis between Washington and its European allies?
Well, I mean, look, the ICC does not need the blessing of the United States to continue its work. This is an independent judicial body recognized by just about every sovereign country around the globe. The reality is that the U.S., although a major superpower, is not the only one. Now, the issue becomes there's always been questions of, Russia does not really recognize, and they've had the same stance that Donald Trump has taken. Vladimir Putin has been adamant that the ICC doesn't have jurisdiction over him and how he sees fit to, in lack of a better term, rule Russia. President Xi has had tensions with the ICC, and the Chinese Central Communist Party's had tensions. Mm-hmm. The more of the big economic superpowers that start defying the court orders of the ICC, some legal experts that I've talked to have said that this could call into question the legitimacy of the ICC. If you have the major global superpowers acting on their own without any regard for the jurisdiction and the sovereignty of the ICC, how much legitimacy are they going to have when they really do have to invoke arrest warrants and set down judicial rulings?
Well, human rights groups have strongly criticized these sanctions. They said that they could embolden authoritarian regimes to retaliate against international courts. Do you see this as a dangerous precedent for global justice?
Absolutely. We've seen it with Vladimir Putin. Vladimir Putin has, a red notice from Interpol on him.
But
There's
not
an
on
arrest.
Benjamin Netanyahu? On Putin, but not on Netanyahu?
What I'm saying is we've seen this when we talk about the large economic powers of the world. You talk about, China, Russia, and obviously the United States. When you look at the big three superpowers and you see Vladimir Putin, question the legitimacy of the ICC. There's arrest warrants on him that he's disregarded. He's traveled, and the places where he's traveled have disregarded it. Yeah, the bottom line here is, yes, this is going to, as I stated before, create a legal crisis and a diplomatic crisis, not just between the U.S. and our Western allies, but this is going to create a very large global legal challenge that needs to be addressed. We're at a point right now where, and this is just my opinion, we're at a point right now where the future of the ICC and the ICCJ itself are legitimately on the brink of not just relevance or not, but having a future. Is there going to be an ICC in the future? If the largest, most powerful nations in the world do not recognize the legitimacy or the authority of the ICC, then authoritarians are just going to go around saying, "Go ahead, put an arrest warrant on me." It's unenforceable.
Yes. Finally, Trump has framed these sanctions as defending U.S. sovereignty from foreign interference. Could this become a wider policy trend, with the U.S. rejecting other international institutions?
Well, we've already seen it. I mean, Donald Trump has been in office for less than a month, and since then we've seen him cut off foreign aid. We've seen him in the process of dismantling the U.S. Agency for International Development. We've also seen the big announcement regarding international organizations is that it's not only pulling out of the Paris Climate, but the big news is he's pulling out of the World Health Organization. There's concern in Washington amongst foreign policy advocates is, does he in fact withdraw from the United Nations? He's threatened it before. He may threaten it again. The question is, where does it stop? We're in a really, from a foreign policy aspect, from a foreign relations angle, we are in a very, very
dangerous situation. It's very dangerous, I think. Well, Mr. Russell, thank you very much for your valuable insights. We appreciate your time. The EU is standing firm in its defense of international justice, while Trump's administration remains committed to shielding Israeli officials from war crimes investigations. With European leaders pushing back, this US-EU standoff is far from over. Now we turn to Washington, where Trump's new budget chief, Russell Vought, has just been confirmed, setting the stage for deep cuts and radical policy shifts.
Donald Trump is his name, and he's there to stay.
As unlikely, impossible, is now reality.
America powerful. We will win, win, win. And we will make America great again. We will very quickly make America great again.
Russell Vought's confirmation as Trump's budget chief signals a major shift in U.S. economic policy. He has pledged deep spending cuts, an expansion of executive power, and a federal workforce purge. His policies could reshape the U.S. economy while raising concerns about social programs, civil service protections and government stability. But as reports suggest, Vogt's vision goes beyond budget cuts. He has been linked to hardline plans to dismantle federal agencies and expand presidential authority in unprecedented ways. As ProPublica reveals, Vogt has outlined a radical government restructuring aiming to fire thousands of federal workers, defund regulatory agencies, and consolidate executive power. His statements about putting bureaucrats in trauma suggest a strategy designed to weaken the civil service and reshape the federal government along ideological lines. With his confirmation, could the U.S. government be heading towards one of its most significant restructurings in modern history? Well, to answer that, we're now joined by Mr. Peter Roth, a contributing editor at Newsweek. Mr. Roth, thank you very much for joining us. And let's start with Russell Vogt's confirmation. What does this mean for Trump's second-term economic agenda?
It means that the White House is hitting the ground running, which should not surprise anyone. This is the second Trump term. There's no learning curve. They know what they have to do. They know how to get it done. The president's agenda is ambitious. He has promised America a leaner, less expensive, more efficient federal government. That means that there is going to have to be agency restructuring, that programs are going to have to be moved around, that people are going to have to be let go. We do this routinely in the private sector. No one blinks. It's time these same kind of private sector initiatives were brought to the process of government.
So Vogt has promised $9 trillion in spending cuts, including deep reductions to Medicaid and food assistance programs. How will this impact low-income Americans and social safety nets?
Well, there's a lot of gloom and doom prediction that we never see actually play out, in fact. One of the things that we have to look at are the standards under which people are getting support in the social safety net. We want the social safety net to be temporary. We want it to provide assistance. We don't want it to be structured in such a way that once you get into the net, you can't get out of it, because as you start to rise up, you lose the protections the net provides. That's going to take a whole rethink. That was part of what was behind the welfare reform. It was tremendously successful that passed when Bill Clinton was president. The idea that people had to show that they were looking for work, that they were trying to take care of themselves if they wanted to get welfare payments. It moved people off welfare. Ultimately, which is what you want. As Ronald Reagan said, the best welfare program is a job. Someone who can take care of themselves and their own family. And I think that Trump wants to move in that same direction.
Okay. One of his most controversial plans is Schedule F, which allows mass firings of career civil servants. What could this mean for the stability of federal agencies?
Most federal agencies are incredibly bloated. I worked in one where the office receptionist had amassed so much leave time that she only worked 4 days a week, which was perfectly legal and fine for her, but didn't work out so well for the rest of us in the office who needed a receptionist. There's room for cutting. It is almost impossible to fire a federal civil servant, even for cause. You have now government officials who are talking openly of resisting within their agencies the directives and initiatives of the duly elected president of the United States. That's anti-democratic. That's some people might call that resistance. Some people might call that an insurgency. If you want to work for the executive branch, you have to be willing to follow the dictates of the leader of the executive branch. There are too many people. This idea that we have a buyout, which is something that is commonly done in private sector to reduce employment expenses at upper levels, people at or nearing retirement age, retirement service. Federal judges put a stop to that, at least for the time being, but it's the kind of thing the Fed should be able to offer. And people who don't want to do the job ought not to be protected by their civil service protections. We have elections for a reason. Sometimes those reasons are to endorse a radical change in policy, which is what I think the 2024 election was. It was a repudiation of the Biden-Harris progressive agenda and an admission that America liked things better the way they were under Trump. They wanted to move in that direction. Everybody that works within a federal agency should be helping row the canoe in that same direction.
Okay.
If they want to row in the other direction to cause confusion, then they should be tossed out on their ear.
Vote has also frozen federal grants for programs deemed woke, including education and climate initiatives. How have states and nonprofits reacted?
The grant recipients obviously have reacted badly because their money's being cut off. But we are $30 trillion in debt. We're a $30 trillion a year economy. We can't go on much longer without America becoming Greece circa 2000, and that wouldn't be good for the rest of the world. We have to find places to cut. And as valuable as research into why rodents may behave in a transgendered fashion might be, it's not critical, it's not necessary, and it needs to go, at least for now. We also ought to be paying other countries to do scientific research that it's illegal by act of Congress to do here in the United States, like gain-of-function research, which is what many people believe produced the COVID virus that caused the world to shut down for a year.
Well,
these programs can go.
yes. Mr. Ruff, I want you to stay with us because now we're going to turn to a key diplomatic event unfolding in Washington as we speak. U.S. President Donald Trump is holding a press conference alongside the Japanese Prime Minister. Let's go live to the press conference and listen in.
Come on, guys. Hey, let's go. Thank you, guys. Let's exit. Thank you, guys. Let's go, guys. Out this way. Guys, let's go. Come on. Thank you. Let's go, guys. Let's go. Guys, let's go. Move, guys. Guys, let's go. Guys. All right, guys, come on. All right, thank you, guys. Let's go. Come on, guys. Let's go. Thank you, guys. Let's go. Guys, let's go. Come on. Out.
Welcome back, ladies and gentlemen. That was a press conference between U.S. President Donald Trump and the Japanese official where they discussed U.S.-Japanese relations and the situation in Gaza. And back to you again, Mr. Roth. We were talking about votes plans that reportedly include a new legal strategy to expand the presidential presidential power. What could this mean for the checks and balances within the U.S. government?
There are a number of people who believe, and I happen to be one of them, that the Article 1 power of the purse that's given to the House of Representatives and to Congress is perhaps the most single important check and balance on the American government. Problem is that Congress in 1974 passed a new law governing how spending decisions would be made that it has failed to adhere to. There is not necessarily a check or balance on that, and there needs to be. Prior to that new budget law, presidents had historically been allowed to withhold spending that Congress had approved. The process was called impoundment. The Trump administration and Russ Vought are looking for ways to bring impoundment back, to give the president more control over spending. The Supreme Court has ruled that a line item veto is unconstitutional.
Okay.
But we have to have something to do to get spending under control, particularly when so many years, the budget for the upcoming fiscal year are determined by these massive continuing resolutions, massive pieces of legislation that don't go through the regular order, that don't go through the budget process, and where members of Congress just make agreements amongst themselves about how they're going to spend money, and nobody votes on it except at the last point, up or down, usually on a bipartisan basis.
Yes.
So we really destroyed the notions of accountability.
Okay.
Something has to happen to put accountability back in the system.
I get your point. Thank you very much, Mr. Roth, for joining us and sharing your insights. Mr. Russell Vought's confirmation cements Trump's economic strategy with sweeping budget cuts, bureaucratic purges, and expanded presidential control. And the clash between the US and the EU over the ICC has intensified, raising questions about America's role in international justice. Meanwhile, Russell Vought's confirmation signals a major shift in US economic policy. With deep spending cuts and a push for greater executive power, what comes next? Well, we're going to have to wait and see. Thank you very much for watching In Focus. I'm Halal Hamalawi. See you next.